Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you're new. Thank you for taking time out of your day to check the video out. We have more PlayStation news, rumors, and leaks to go over and cover here today. So do me a favor before we dive into today's topics. If you end up enjoying the video or finding it informative, be sure to leave it a like. And if you are new here to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well. We're starting here with a new Sony patent that was discovered being reported by OP Attack. Sony Interactive Entertainment is on a mission to continuously improve the haptic feedback system for their controllers. Why shouldn't they? Fans love it, and the immersion we get as players is a great option to have. In an effort to take things with haptic feedback to the next level, Sony has recently published a new patent. So to essentially simplify what the patent is saying, it is Sony suggesting adding some type of weighted component that can actually move inside of the controller to change overall weight distribution. And the article continues by saying current game controllers only have vibratory movements to generate haptic feedback, limiting the overall experience. Sony believes that if we add a rotational weight distribution to the current haptic feedback module, we can take the haptic experience to the next level. For this to be achieved, they think that adding a rotatable weighted component can do the trick. By shifting the center of mass of the controller, the component will be able to map the experience in a more accurate way depending on the feedback received while playing a video game. You will actually be able to feel the weight of the controller being shifted depending on the action you take in the game. Now, I thought this was pretty interesting. I didn't see pretty much anybody covering this except for OP Attack, and what we could be looking at is something that makes its way into the Dualsense 2, right? We know that the PlayStation 6 is currently in development. It's going to be coming out sometime in 2027 or 2028. I have to imagine that one of the major selling points of the PlayStation 6 is going to be the Dualsense 2, and we know that Sony's going to try to find any way they can to add to the haptic feedback experience. So I'm not so sure that this is necessarily going to be the thing that does the trick. It's one of these things where I feel like I would have to experience it myself and feel it to know if it's actually going to add anything to the overall experience or if it could just end up getting kind of annoying. But either way, this is the type of stuff that Sony is working on, looking to try to innovate in the controller space. Moving on to the next topic, we're talking about Ghost of Tsushima and how apparently we may be hearing about the PC version of Ghost of Tsushima very soon. This is coming from the insider Special Nick over on X/Twitter. He says, I'm hearing that we might be getting something about the Ghost of Tsushima PC port pretty soon, maybe around March 5th. Now that's pretty much all he had to say, but this is, I would say, at this point in time, one of the most eagerly anticipated PC ports that has yet to be announced by Sony. We've seen Horizon, The Last of Us, God of War, etc. make their way to PC. Now it seems like one of the only major franchises that's left that we assume is going to be getting a sequel is Ghost of Tsushima. Now, to me, what's interesting about this is how random it sounds like it's going to be. He doesn't say there's going to be like a state of play or anything like that. He makes it seem like we're just going to get an announcement of Ghost of Tsushima releasing on PC, which I guess is certainly one way for Sony to do that. But something else that interests me about this is that if we do get the announcement of Ghost of Tsushima for PC, it makes me think we might not be too far off from getting the official announcement of the sequel to Ghost of Tsushima. So just something to consider. We'll have to see if there ends up being any truth to this. We'll know very soon. We're going to move on to the next topic, which talks about PlayStation Plus's cloud streaming. Specifically, if you're subscribed to PlayStation Plus Premium, you do gain access to cloud streaming, and it turns out that it's much better than what you might expect. This is being reported by Push Square, where they say Sony's had its head in the cloud streaming business for much longer than its rivals. As you may recall, it snapped up Gaikai prior to the launch of the PS4 and spent years peddling PlayStation Now before transitioning the service to PlayStation Plus Premium a few years ago. Despite this, it's largely been considered irrelevant in the space, with bigger names like Microsoft and Google muscling their way into the market more recently. It turns out, however, that PlayStation is doing a very good job with its cloud streaming service, An extensive Eurogamer.net report, which we recommend you read in full, reveals that recent upgrades to the service have been a leapfrog to Xbox's xCloud solution, delivering PS5 games at 60 FPS in 4K with HDR, as well as with high-quality surround sound and Tempest audio where available. While there are still flaws related to the technology, Sony's service is dramatically outperforming Microsoft's with vastly superior image quality. Xbox is bafflingly using Xbox Series S instances of its games for cloud streaming, so already it finds itself at a disadvantage to the native PS5 versions leveraged by Sony. But the report notes of a Plague Tale Requiem, quote, "The Xbox solution is not even close to Sony's, with a hugely compressed image that simply cannot handle elements like swaying grass, fire, or even the shaded detail of a house," end quote. Due to the fact Microsoft is using Xbox Series S instances, PS Plus's cloud streaming also posts a frame rate advantage over its rival. Although it should be noted Sony's solution comes at the cost of a slightly higher input lag, nevertheless, the results are surprising and perhaps not what anyone would have predicted based on the importance each platform holder has placed on the technology recently. So yes, because this was done by Eurogamer, there was also a Digital Foundry video that was released that I do recommend watching because the results are genuinely surprising. I mean, we talked about Sony upgrading their cloud technology, leveraging PS5s now to be able to deliver 60 FPS in 4K with HDR. And so maybe that in and of itself isn't necessarily that surprising, but when it's compared to Microsoft's xCloud efforts, the difference is quite shocking. I will say it is unexpected that Sony is by far and away doing a significantly better job in this area than its closest rival with Microsoft. So yeah, I just had to report this to you guys and let you know that when it comes to the cloud solution that Sony is offering for the PlayStation brand and product, they're doing a very good job. We're moving on to the next topic here, which talks about Neil Druckmann and how he seems to hint at his time being limited in the industry going forward when it comes to how many big games he feels like he can make. BGC reports Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us creative director Neil Druckmann has said he started thinking seriously about when he might stop making blockbuster games. In an interview with rapper Logic, Naughty Dog's president said he could envision himself transitioning to something more low-key, which enables him to continue being creative in a less stressful environment, while he also spends more time with his kids. Asked if he sees himself making games forever, Druckmann said that recently he's really enjoyed working on other creative projects like HBO's Last of Us TV show or the Halloween Horror Nights experience at Universal Studios. "I guess that I don't see myself doing this forever at this scale," he said. "It's just a lot, and it takes a lot out of you. It's very stressful to manage that many people and multiple studios worldwide." Yeah, so I'm just at a point in my life where it's like you start looking at what's the end game here? When is it time to call it? So I could see myself transitioning to something that's more low-key and lower stress that still allows me to have the creative outlet, Druckmann said. "But you know, I've started thinking about how many more of these games do I have in me, and it's not that many." Neil Druckmann went on to say that everything changed following the release of 2009's Uncharted 2, and that he feels like he's basically been a victim of his own success. And so I'm not going to read the entire quote, but basically what he's describing is how it just felt like simpler times during Uncharted 2 because Naughty Dog was kind of under the radar. They obviously found success with Uncharted, but they were not in this super prestigious position where there's just a massive amount of expectation and, there wasn't too much to live up to. And obviously now when we look at Naughty Dog, that has completely changed. All eyes are on what their next project's going to be, if it's going to live up, if it's going to be very different or not from something like The Last of Us Part 2 or Uncharted 4. And so, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. These big AAA games that Naughty Dog produces take many, many years to develop. And as we saw and as we continue to see with these documentaries that Sony releases, it's clearly a very difficult and stressful endeavor for everybody involved. So I think that we are at least going to get one more game from Neil Druckmann. and he kind of hinted at this game a little bit in this interview with Logic, where, to kind of paraphrase what he said, he was basically just describing that it's very difficult, it's very challenging, and it is very ambitious. So yeah, during all this conversation about the possibility of Sony, making their games smaller and less ambitious, seems like that's not necessarily going to happen anytime soon. We're moving on to the final topic of the video, and this talks about the future of Spider-Man, specifically on PlayStation. Once again, VGC reports Yuri Lowenthal, who voices Peter Parker in Insomniac's Spider-Man games, thinks the character will return in a future series installment. In a Gizmodo interview published following Spider-Man 2's release last October, and there are spoilers here, so be warned, Insomniac narrative director Ben Arfman and advanced writer Brittany Morris suggested that this wouldn't be the case in a potential sequel. Asked about the game's ending, which implied a passing of the torch from Peter Parker to Miles Morales, and who will be the main Spider-Man going forward, the Insomniac duo suggested the latter would take the center, as the former takes a back seat, for the time being at least. Seemingly referring to these comments during a new interview with Variety, Lowenthal said he doesn't think Insomniac is done with Peter Parker. There have been some comments recently that were picked up to infer that Peter is out and Miles is in. He said, "Well, I think that Peter would love to believe that he can just turn it off and not be Spider-Man anymore and live in a completely new, normal life. I don't think that's what's going to happen now. I don't know. I haven't read the script yet. They're probably still working on it, but I don't think that's the last we're going to see of Peter. I think it's a cool place to leave it. It's a cool change for him. I think he 100% trusts Miles. Miles has really stepped up, and he's like, oh, maybe I can get a little break." And so that is what Yuri Lowenthal had to say about, seeing Peter Parker in future iterations of Spider-Man on PlayStation. And yeah, it's interesting to hear what he has to say, because he seems very confident that Peter Parker's still going to play a very significant role going forward. And I believe that. I don't think there's any reason to believe that he's going to necessarily take that much of a back seat. If anything, it might just be temporary, or they might just kind of, pass the torch back and forth. But yeah, I just figured I would report this to you guys and let you know what Yuri thinks about this. Anyway, that's going to do it for the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it informative. If you did, be sure to leave it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share the video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.